For me, two of the most useless words in the English language are overrated and underrated. Both of these words are supposed to deal with subjective opinions being either too positive or too negative, but they've warped into a quick way for someone to say, I didn't like this thing other people liked, or vice versa. This has become especially prominent in horror movies over the last few years, where some critically acclaimed films have been chastised by moviegoers for being too boring or not scary, where I think this is just a case of expectations not matching reality. The most recent film to experience the branding of the O word was The Witch, a technically 1-week-old horror movie that first premiered over a year ago at Sundance Film Festival. Critical response to this film has been almost universally positive since it made the festival run, with some praising it for being genuinely unnerving and saying that the film gives off a vibe that we're watching something we shouldn't be seeing. Snippets like that would plant many an ass in many a seat, my own included as I saw the film on opening night. Almost as soon as the film started, I could tell that some of the people in the theater were there for the wrong reasons and were probably gonna hate it. The accents and dialect used throughout garnered chuckles during serious moments, and there was a tremendous amount of hushed conversation, probably between people trying to figure out what the characters were saying, which is actually fair. But at the end of the movie, I heard several people remark that it wasn't scary and that they didn't jump once, where I found myself, as that one critic said, genuinely unnerved for almost the entire runtime. This isn't gonna turn into an opinion piece, but I do feel that I should make my biases clear by saying that I loved The Witch. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with disliking this movie. It isn't for everyone by any means. The accents, as previously mentioned, are pretty difficult to understand at times, and some viewers might find that frustrating.
What went we out into this wilderness to find?
The film is paced pretty slowly after its first 10 minutes, and some viewers might find that boring. These are valid complaints, but I think that many of them stem from people who are used to the horror movies that generally succeed in theaters. Last year, we had The Woman in Black 2, Paranormal Activity 6, I think, Green Inferno, the Poltergeist remake, The Gallows, The Lazarus Effect, Sinister 2, and Jupiter Ascending. All of these films subscribe more to jump scare horror than The Witch does, and I sincerely believe that a lot of people going to theaters to see horror movies expect this jump scare horror, which again is fine. People like what they like. However, this has been a recurring trend for a few years now. One critically acclaimed horror movie that is screened at numerous festivals is disliked by moviegoers because it isn't scary enough. In 2016, we have The Witch. In 2015, we had It Follows, and in 2014, we had the one that arguably started this annual trend, The Babadook. I'm sure we can dig back further and find more, but as far as I can tell, this trend really picked up with The Babadook. All three of these films have received heaps of praise from critics, but have been met with a considerably more lukewarm response from moviegoers. It's like clockwork at this point. So I figured the best way to learn about why this happens is to read some audience reviews. Don't even want to give it 1 star. This is one of the worst horror movies I have ever wasted my money on. There was no blood, no guts, and it was not scary. It dragged on and on. This movie was so bad. Total waste of time and money. In one word, it's totally the worst movies I ever had the torture of sitting through. You see what I mean? I don't think most of those people went into the theater expecting the kinds of movies that they got, and a lot of this misinformation comes about because of marketing. If you watch the trailers for the 3 films I mentioned, all of them highlight the most action-packed, actively scary parts of the film. In the case of The Witch, it genuinely struggles to do even that, as so many of the intense moments are spoilers, and whoever made the trailers for this movie actually gives a fuck about not ruining things for everyone. But just take a look at these trailers.
What do you want? You're trespassing in my house!
I'm sick, Sam. I need help. It isn't real. It isn't real.
Those look pretty fucking intense, right? And in those scenes, they are, but that's not what a majority of these films consist of. Most of these films' runtimes is spent trying to build tension, character, story. Whether or not they do this successfully is again totally subjective, but that's the focus in them. The focus isn't to hit you with a loud noise and get your heart rate up, it's to crawl under your skin and unnerve you. This just outright doesn't scare some people, and the jump scare method petrifies them. But those same people are continuously being led to see these slower paced, mostly jump scare free horror films and are ending up disappointed. It's unfortunate unfortunate because the only way to sell movies like The Witch is to portray it as if it resembles most of what comes out in theaters now. Just look at Annabelle and Ouija from 2014. Annabelle was a spin-off of The Conjuring, which was a box office success on its own and garnered good reviews. Annabelle succeeded in doing one of those things. And Ouija was based off of a fucking board game and still managed to kill it at the box office despite abysmal reviews. Now, you can easily attribute their success to the fact that production budgets are dwarfed by the makeup budgets on some blockbusters, but the fact is that the trailers made for those films are extremely effective at drawing in a viewership that enjoys jump scares. Also, they're rated PG-13, where the other three I've discussed are rated R, so, stupid kids don't have to buy tickets to Norm of the North to go see them.
But I'll need soldiers on the ground. Those little guys?
He wants you to stomp on him. He wants you to prove how tough he is.
Which brings me back to the use of the words overrated and underrated. The Witch, It Follows, and The Babadook were all slapped with overrated shortly after they were released, and it's easy to see why. People pay to see movies more reliant on jump scares because most wide-release horror films match that description. When you throw in a curveball, you get confusion, you get disappointment, and worst of all, you get boredom. The fact of the matter is that some people sincerely couldn't give less of a shit about whether a horror movie is creative. They just want to get spooked by some clangs. And that's fine. Say okay, man. So when all is said and done, I fall somewhere in the middle of this long-running conversation. Horror isn't dying anytime soon, and if you say that, you're fucking goofball supreme. There are tons and tons of great horror films coming out all the time. They just aren't what the majority of people are interested in seeing. And while I'm definitely in the camp that finds that disappointing, I'm failing to see how it invalidates the people who like jump scares more, because clearly there's quite a lot of them. So rather than complaining about all the jump scare shit that we get, make an effort to support the horror that you like. And if the horror you like is jump scare filled movies, then keep going to see them. Horror is the only genre that comes anywhere close to being as subjective as comedy. Most people can agree when a drama or a science fiction film is well made, but comedy and horror are two peas in a pod. You show them to two people and you can get two vastly different reactions. And that similarity is a big part of the reason they work together so well, but that's another discussion for another time. For now, keep paying for what you want to see, and perhaps more importantly, lower your expectations. I can pretty much guarantee you that they're always too high. I have literally taken bowel movements with more substantive plot. This move was a ton of hipster Instagram filters fitted to an aimless B-roll that somehow turned into a horror film. Sleeping with someone doesn't pass on monsters unless you count venereal diseases. I didn't read that one prior to recording.